Hello, everybody. Welcome to the TechRaptor podcast. I'm Robert Scarpanito, your features editor.
Andrew Rotten, editor-in-chief.
Rutledge Doggett, site founder.
Andrew Stretch, Reformed Orthodox Rabbi editor.
Oh, no. Oh, man.
There was no way that I wasn't going to go with that one for this week.
Yeah, but like it had to be a fifth person, like someone behind you that we were all just like,
That's right.
And then you finished
walks
it.
in.
Yeah,
Right.
that guy, that Sanrio character, that's the
Uh-huh.
Reformed Orthodox Rabbi editor.
Oh,
Ah, I see. I'm glad that you have someone like that in your
I
room.
thought his name was
Always.
Bill Clinton.
Bill Clinton, the famous Sanrio character. Yeah.
Yeah, Hello Kitty and Bill Clinton.
Yeah, if you don't know what we're referencing, I think you might have missed the weird ass ending of the Game Awards where a trolly 15-year-old kid stole Elden Ring's thunder. If you want to check out our Game Awards thoughts, though, we have a 4-hour-ish long live stream on our YouTube channel where we get progressively drunker as we played a drinking game.
Yep.
And we also have a short little video. This is kind of a quick wrap up of our thoughts. If you only have a short amount of time, you can check those out on YouTube. We're going to post the links down below in our show notes and description. And in this episode, we're going to get into Forspoken later in the show. But first, let's get into some news that I have been wanting to talk about since the second it hit Twitter. John Garvin, former writer at the Bend studio, where he worked on Days Gone, tweeted this fun little thing out when someone else was praising the game and saying, "Oh, I don't understand how Days Gone didn't get universal praise from critics." John Garvin quote tweeted it and then said 3 reasons. 1, it had tech issues like bugs, streaming, and frame rate. 2, it had reviewers who couldn't be bothered to actually play the game. And 3, it had, well, actually 3 dot and 3 comma, it had woke reviewers who couldn't handle a gruff white biker looking at his date's ass. Too woke to appreciate Days Gone.
Well, you know, when the woke cabal approaches you to pay you to be more woke, it's kind of hard to turn down their offer. You know what I
It
mean?
really is. I mean, I get where he's coming from, because when I was playing through Days Gone, I kept thinking about why doesn't this game have more gun control? And frankly, that was really really triggering me throughout my playthrough, and I just couldn't finish beating this mediocre zombie game.
What's that got to do with the dude looking at his date's ass?
Well, I'm woke, so I'm thinking about all the other woke opinions that I carry, that I bring to my gaming table.
Hmm.
Mhm.
I mean, there's
I
just
feel
that
like-
one scene where like his date's like climbing up a ladder, right? And he's commenting. I haven't played the game. I have no intention to, but I just remember seeing that and being like kind of a weird thing to throw in there.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I love that it's right after to like a very Trumpian slander at the media of they didn't even play the game, you know, which is just classic. The media
it's
sucks.
Total bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
Reviewers play the game everywhere. Like any big, everybody always likes to talk shit about IGN. They don't get paid for their reviews by anybody. That's
Mhm.
absurd. Like the only people that like the game companies do offer people to pay for reviews, but they're also all the shitty companies from games you've never heard of because nobody takes up their offer.
Yep.
They're all scammy little games that nobody ever hears about.
Yeah, it's like Schrodinger's media sucks, right? Is
Yeah.
that at the same time we are being paid off to give good reviews, but also we don't play the video games we review,
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
also can't handle gruff white men.
And
Yes.
somebody commented on our Callisto Protocol review this morning and said, I liked it. The reviewer didn't play the game.
Classic, of course.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
so-
that's really
The
where a
opinion's
lot
different.
of reviewers forget is that reviews are they're opinionated reviews. You know, they can take some very literal, like technical, like looks at the game. I see on our Days Gone review, you know, we had cons for terrible writing, tacked on fourth act, annoying game mechanics, boring horde fights, an abundance of glitches. That like, yeah, you know, a important thing to do with reviews and with reviewers is find a reviewer who shares your opinion of games, even if they move
Yeah.
site to site. Follow the person whose opinion you most align with, and that's when you're going to get it best. But if this guy's walking around thinking that everyone smells like shit, he probably needs to check his own shoe.
Yeah.
Because you
Seriously.
can't have every reviewer criticize it and then think, well, it's it's like the Seymour Skinner meme of, is it me who's wrong? No, it must be all the reviewers that are wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's one thing too. I'm glad that you brought up our review, because I think generally, from what I remember of the reviews of the game, I can't think of one time where explicitly the reason I'm taking 1 point off of my score is because this gruff white biker stares at his date's ass for a couple seconds.
My guess is the vast majority of reviews didn't even mention it. That just got memed hard on the internet because it was cringe.
Yeah,
Mhm.
like a lot of the writing. Yeah, it's like as long as you ride me as hard as you ride your bike. It's like that. Like this man's wrote that line. It was like genius. How do they not give us a 10?
No notes.
Yeah. And I don't know. I think we're just hot off. Like it makes me laugh so much that we're hot off God of War, featuring probably one of the gruffest white dudes, and that game got like a 10, like 10s across the board. Granted, it didn't stare at a date's ass or anything, but still, I don't think the problem is like the audience being unwilling to accept a gruff white man as the main character of a video game. I think we can go back to 1842 and find video games all the way back then that started a gruff white dude.
That's right.
Yeah.
Started very early, long before the original video game crash.
Right. Even before Pac-Man himself. And I think 2 days or so, or a day after John tweeted this, Ben Studio tweeted out a little image that says, "We're aware of the comments made by our previous creative director on Days Gone regarding his personal view on the critical reception of our IP, and Ben Studio does not share his sentiment, nor does it reflect the views of our team." So
that there was a PR intern at Ben Studio that was refreshing Twitter and went, "Oh, come on, fuck."
I'm sure John Garvin's going to have a lot of work coming his way soon too.
Well,
I just don't understand. I don't understand why developers keep doing this. Like, I get that you're trying to pander to a particular audience, but the vast majority of the gaming industry is not like bothered by what people are calling like wokeness. Like, it's also a very progressive industry.
That's not to say that you should be bullied into making a game that you think will appeal to a mass audience. If you want to make a niche game, or a game that you think targets a more niche sub-demographic of video game players, you're more than welcome to do that, but you can't cry like wokeism, or you can't cry prejudice against you for targeting that smaller demographic. It's supply and demand. If there is less demand for an NFT game, because we all know that they're scams, then you can't come out the other side of it and think, "Oh, that's so weird. My last game from a critically acclaimed studio sold shit tons more than this garbage that I'm flocking to a demographic that doesn't like NFTs and is aware of the scam."
Yeah. I mean, this is the same, dare I say, clown who, when asked about, like, David Jaffe asked him about, oh, hey, like, Days Gone has had a resurgence recently after all the patches, and it's been on like PS Plus. People are liking it. It's kind of like, renaissance for the game. And this man's response is, yeah, well, if they love the game, they should buy it at fucking full price. And it's like, you are just misunderstanding the community like completely. Like, sure, is it better for the studio bottom line if every single player of your game buys it at the full $60 at the time, $70 now? For sure. Yeah, it's better for you, but I would argue it's also just as good to have positive word of mouth where people discover like, oh, hey, this game's actually pretty good.
Feels like
that's where a lot of the hype. Go ahead.
Honestly, it feels like we're a few months from him just doing full-on rants about, the entitled millennials and Zoomers and going down that path.
Yeah, he's probably at some point going to say all they're doing is playing Fortnite to play a real video game,
or whatever.
Yeah.
People get angry and find the weirdest hills to die on.
How pissed was he when people like they were talking positively about The Last of Us Part 2?
Too woke.
Or Cyberpunk.
Yeah, I mean, Cyberpunk literally is like sex sells in the video game.
Yes.
It's like
It is sex sells plus
ads are
a glitchy,
everywhere.
terrible mess.
Yeah.
like I remember when it first launched. All the bugs aside, there was that weird a weird problem with the number of dildos that are just everywhere, right? So
That's
yeah.
the future. You may not like it, but that's the future.
That's the
Yeah.
future.
Everything converges at the dildo point.
I hate everything you just said there, Scrappy.
Wow. That's profound. Let's make that the title.
Yeah, thank you. Everything converges at the dildo point.
Yeah, put in quotes.
Not sure I know what that means, but okay.
Me neither.
It means what you want it to mean.
But I do think to kind of go back to this whole woke reviewers thing. I think it's something that we've seen kind of surge a lot in the industry, right? At least among the community, is a very small but very obnoxiously loud minority that is so anti-progressive and use the word woke to kind of basically make any argument. You know what I mean? Like even if
Didn't
it's
that get
not
defined recently.
did it like by Merriam-Webster or something?
Yeah, I know they've done something. I thought they tweeted something out.
Keep talking. I'm gonna find where they
Gonna
had
track this down.
Yeah,
You're right though.
Yeah.
There's definitely been like this over the last year-ish, like this continued surge of that kind of stuff where something happens to a developer or something isn't received they want it to, and it's the woke reviewers' fault, or it's the woke zoomers. Like, if your game can't stand on its own without some sort of I don't know, that's your game's problem. It's not the reviewer's problem. And I think you were right earlier to where find reviewers you like or that you identify with, like kind of from a gameplay perspective, but at the same time look at reviews as a guiding factor, not like gospel. Like, we're not here to basically, we're not publishing reviews to say we want you to buy this. We're publishing reviews to say this was our experience with the game. If this is what you're cool with and what kind of identifies with how you like to play games, pick it up. Oh, yeah. Reviewers are not saying like don't buy this or buy this in reviews. Some do, obviously, but for the most part, it's meant to be a guiding factor in kind of us discussing the merits of a game, not so much any of the messaging within.
Mm-hmm. Just the blanket use of, well, I don't agree with you, you're woke. It's like the 21st century equivalent of very much losing an argument, but then pointing out that someone used the wrong version of there when they were smacking you down. Like, it's okay, clearly you don't have anything better to say because this is your fallback, so you've lost.
Yeah, I find it funny that they would think that reviewers could snuff out a game like Days Gone, a first-party Sony major title. Like, if someone wanted to play it and saw, like, they're gonna play it. It's not like it's some indie game or small game where, like, if the media just didn't want to talk about it, a lot of times those won't get the attention or whatever, because they don't have the massive, millions and millions of dollars for marketing. Where something like Days Gone is a major game, like, it's gonna reach its audience, and whether they want it or not, that's up to them.
We've even been seeing trailers for it for years before it came out.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, we saw this too with another PlayStation exclusive, The Last of Us, right? It wasn't that the woke reviewers bashed it, but more that there was another contingency of people who were angry at the game and kept calling it woke for myriad reasons, for no real reason, and kept making up false claims just to justify their I hate this woke garbage sort of stance.
Well, it's funny you say that too, because I've seen over the last couple of years, people who previously, when it came out, praised The Last of Us very highly, now say that it's woke. Mm-hmm. So there's been a shift from a mentality perspective to where even people, like, if I've gone back through people's tweets and been like, well, you praised it like 6 years ago. What changed? That type of stuff is very strange to see, but it's definitely becoming more prevalent.
I mean, it's not that strange to see. You know why it happened. Because bigots.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Classic.
What
Yeah.
happened 6 years ago?
Oh my god, it was 6 years ago, huh?
Mhm. Mhm.
No, even I remember
2016.
some of the largest stink when Last of Us Part 2 was coming out was that they thought that Abby was trans and just a masked female,
Mhm.
and that wasn't the case. But tell you what, that didn't stop any fucking aggression.
Yeah.
People still say it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's bigotry that's like the leading cause of stupidity here.
And we're seeing a shift in the developer side of the industry to where the people who are saying things like this are getting punished. So, well, not like punish, but like less opportunities. So it just kind of blows my mind that he said what he said, knowing that a lot of the actual game development side is going more progressive in terms of ideals, and you look at unions and things like that. There's this huge shift in the games industry. And saying
I
like
don't think it's
these things
progressive
aren't
to say
helpful.
that companies are leaning towards recognizing basic human rights.
Yeah.
True.
And I also think it's fair to point out that as much as there is a group of people in the industry that do want things to be more progressive and more, humans are humans and we should treat humans with basic decency. Call of Duty, the most hoo-wah motherfucking thing on the planet, is still like the biggest video game moneymaker. And that is like, I wouldn't call it outright like right leaning, but it definitely is coded very
I
conservative.
mean, the first game of Call of Duty you could play as a woman was also the first game you could play as a dog. So that kind of, gives you a bit of a timeline.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, us woke reviewers are done talking about this story. I think, we need to move on or else we're going to get too triggered by the
His
by the
Twitter is now
Hans.
privated as well. I just went to check to see if there was anything else, any fun nuggets that he had tweeted since then, but unfortunately not.
It was pretty quick after he tweeted that out, because I remember seeing the stories like that day, and then I went to his Twitter and it was already private. So I was like, I think he fucked
deleted
around
it
and
about
found
6
out.
hours later too.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, people like him, they love to be the perpetual victim. And that's all it is. He deleted it because people were so mean to him.
Of course. They were so mean to him in his game with the gruff white man.
Yeah.
Let's get into some more businessy kind of news. The Federal Trade Commission here in the United States has sued to block Microsoft's acquisition of Activision-Blizzard, citing specifically that when the European Commission reviewed their Microsoft's acquisition of ZeniMax, the FTC claims that the European Commission was led to believe that games like Starfield and Redfall and the Elder Scrolls would still they wouldn't be exclusive. And then just a month or two later, Microsoft confirmed that Starfield is an Xbox exclusive, Redfall is an Xbox and PC exclusive. And because of that, the FTC has been led to believe that Call of Duty and other big Activision Blizzard products will only be a Microsoft exclusive, and that is too much monopoly power, so they are blocking it. And then the European Commission comes out. One of their spokespeople says, "Hey, we were not led to believe that this Xbox exclusive content would lead to a monopoly, and we cleared the Microsoft ZeniMax transaction unconditionally, as it concluded that the transaction would not raise competition concerns." So that isn't the only point that the FTC brings up in its litigation. However, it is one of the major sticking points here. And the other, the Europe's FTC essentially just said, "Hey, nope, not us."
Yeah. They basically called the ZeniMax transaction a preview of this one too. Basically, so that sale purchase is going to definitely impact the direction this goes. But from what I've been reading, it's not set in stone that it will get blocked. I think we're still very early, and I'm definitely curious to see what kind of arguments Microsoft brings to the table. Because there's a lot of directions they can go, but ultimately this is a huge deal. I mean, it's monstrous, and it could very well fuel a monopoly. It's kind of Microsoft. Was that like early 2000s all over again, where they got sued by the FTC for some of their business practices that were monopolistic.
Right.
So
different sphere though, right? We're talking this was like Internet Explorer.
Yeah, that was more on the
video
tech side.
Yeah.
So this is not the first time Microsoft's had to fight something like this. But it definitely is probably one of the biggest deals in gaming of all time, which is why it's under the level of scrutiny that it's under.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this is such a tricky one to debate because you're debating a lot of hypotheticals, right? Because Microsoft, like, if they do end up owning Activision-Blizzard, they can decide to do whatever the fuck they want to do with their IP, like at a drop of a hat, right? So you could hypothetically say that even though right now, as we speak, Nintendo has signed a deal with Microsoft, a 10-year-long deal, which is a commitment to bring Call of Duty to Nintendo systems, right? Whether that's the current Switch, where it'll run at 2 frames per second, or a Switch 2, or whatever the next Nintendo hardware is.
No,
right?
no. You're missing the big picture. They're just going to launch a cloud edition, run it off Xbox Game Plus servers. They don't have to do shit. They just need to create a Switch cartridge that will let you access Game Pass.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. And thank you for bringing up the Game Pass plug. I'm glad that we can start it here. But so, that's one thing. But then hypothetically, you could always just say, oh, and then Phil will just wake up the next day and be like, just kidding. And then make Call of Duty exclusive. Like, you could totally hypothetically say that, right? But then you could also point at when Microsoft acquired Minecraft. They totally could have just said, yep, you need to be on Xbox or PC to play Minecraft. And instead they were like, and we're bringing it to iPhone and your Tamagotchi and your Ouya. Like they brought it everywhere.
There was a 3DS edition of Minecraft for a bit.
Mm-hmm. So you could make up hypothetical situations that go both ways, which I think is what makes this so difficult, because you're also dealing with a $69 billion acquisition. Like, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, I think they'd be hurting themselves. Like, everybody's like, well, they should do Call of Duty. It'll sell more consoles. I think they would be legitimately hurting themselves if they were to stick Call of Duty on only one platform. Like,
for sure.
Business case perspective, it's dumb. And I think Sony knows it, but they are very threatened by Xbox and Microsoft Studios because of their size, because of Game Pass. And so they're trying to protect their market cap at the end of the day. But at the same time, like, there are enough Call of Duty gamers on PlayStation that would be a huge revenue hit for them to limit to Xbox, because a lot of gamers, if you're used to one platform, you're not necessarily buying the other one just because of one game. It's usually because of a lot more than one game. So I'll be curious. I mean, Phil's kind of reached out that olive branch, right? He's done it with Nintendo. He's trying to do it with PlayStation.
He
whether
sent
that
it
is
to
like
Steam as well.
Yeah, and I mean, whether or not it's earnest or part of trying to be like, hey, FTC, see, we're playing fair, remains to be seen.
I mean, it's obviously a show for the FTC. But I think Microsoft is totally fine with everybody arguing with what they are, because they're playing the long game. The idea of console exclusivity and all that stuff isn't going to matter to them in the future. And 10 years is no fucking time at all for a company like Microsoft. 10 years sounds like a lot to people that don't know anything. Like, oh, wow, how generous of them. It's like, that's no. If it's 10 years and then after that, they can just do whatever they want because everybody gives them a pass because they gave them 10 years. That's nothing. It'd be like Disney being like, okay, we gave everybody 10 years of Mickey, but now it's ours forever. And it's like, oh yeah, that's right. It is very valuable forever. But it feels like they're definitely playing the long game of like, we're building an ecosystem and we're building the streaming and stuff. We're going to be on every device. I don't need a console in the future necessarily. I'm going to sell you a controller and a login, and I have these games. That's what it is. So they're like, that's fine as long as they get their IP. Like, I'm sure they'll make all kinds of concessions for console stuff for now because they're playing the long game.
Right. I think that's what makes this argument so tricky, right? Is that if this were like 2015 Microsoft, I think I'd lean more toward what the FTC is trying to do,
Oh,
because
yeah.
that back then, right, that Microsoft was all about like, you're playing on the Xbox One, right? This is the machine that you buy to play our video games and all the video
That's
games that we
right.
support.
And the Kinect is the future.
Right? It still is in my heart. But lest I remind you, I saw like a tweet about the Game Awards that was about like, man, it's kind of an L for Microsoft that they didn't have anything at the Game Awards, which I found very interesting, because to me, I was like, I don't think Microsoft won, quote unquote, the announcement game or whatever, but anytime they showed up, it was about that Samsung X Game Pass or Microsoft streaming thing. Like, it was all about the, like, you don't need our box. Just if you have a Samsung TV, you can already play our games. That was their message. It wasn't check out Halo Infinite season whatever, right? Like, no one gives a shit
That's
about
what I'm getting
that.
at. That's what they want you on. That's what they're getting you to.
They want to be Netflix. They want to be that subscription on your credit card that just renews every month. And if you happen to use Netflix that month, cool. If you don't, well, it's going to be more of a pain to cancel and then re-get it.
Yeah.
So I might as well just keep Game Pass.
Well, it's one of those, like, it takes nothing to, or very little in comparison to have someone get invested in your ecosystem, because that's what consoles are. They sell them at a loss so that they get you stuck into their ecosystem, and if they get rid of that completely, that's huge. So like, they don't give a shit about that, and I'm sure. I wouldn't be surprised if 10, 15 years from now there isn't an quote unquote Xbox other than some streaming
like
device
a stick
thing
or something.
Yeah, my guess would
the
be
Xbox app.
Yeah.
My guess would be in 10 years we don't see how we have like the Xbox Series X and the Series S, or we don't have like the Pro edition of a console and a standard. I reckon that they will release that $1,000, like, this is the absolute enthusiast device.
Yeah.
Crank it up to all the power. We only need to make half as many, and then anyone else who's interested, by now you hopefully have gigabit. Just your TV you already have, your old Xbox console you already have, our new streaming stick that we've got that also has Netflix, Hulu, all of your other media apps. Play it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just play it there.
I'm sure that is. Yeah, there's not going to be these cheap in comparison consoles, like a $500 console, like something like that coming out at mass. I'd be surprised.
Yeah.
Either that or it's going to be a super cheap streaming stick of some kind.
Yeah, that's
right.
It's the Roku of
which we know they're working on.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's that difference in strategy, right? Where there's not that much of a hardware entry point, where it doesn't quite feel like an exclusivity problem, monopolization problem, because while Microsoft is acquiring all the software, they're also lowering their hardware barriers. So it doesn't feel like, oh, now I have to buy the Xbox One X or Xbox Series X, or else I can't play that video game, because you can just download the app on your TV or stream it from your phone, or
all kind of stuff.
That's the key
to your brain.
The key difference in philosophy between Xbox and PlayStation is, like, PlayStation's very focused on the here and now. Like, we want to win right now, and Microsoft's just like, fuck it, we'll win 10 years from now. Like,
I think
we're putting everything in place for the future. Not so concerned with right now. They bought ZeniMax not for anything right now, but for what they want to do in the future.
And we whenever we talk about them, I always like to remind people, like, Sony is a puny company in comparison to Microsoft. Microsoft has insane amount of money because they make an insane amount of money.
I mean, but then as well as the FTC is talking about, monopolization in the industry, if you compare where Microsoft is in the industry to Sony is in the industry, you'll see that Sony's share is like an extra 50% larger.
Yeah.
So it's also weird. It's like Microsoft isn't the underdog, but they're also certainly not the big dog. It's depending on which way you want to look at it, it tells a different story.
Well, the hard part is, right, when you're talking about the pure software itself, Xbox doesn't show up that well, the Xbox brand. Like if you're talking just video games,
Yeah.
because they Microsoft did announce that they're raising their first party prices to $70, which man, I can't wait to buy Halo Infinite at $70.
It's just more incentive to do Game Pass, guys.
Yeah.
I mean, this is realistically a first step into them announcing, and then Game Pass Ultimate's going to be $20 a month instead of what is that, like 15 right now plus tax.
Well, but they also have the family plan coming out as well, which is going to,
right.
for people who, the same way that Nintendo's family plan, you can get together, it's like $80 for a year, but you can put 8 people on it. And suddenly if you and even like 3 friends get together, you're back down to paying the standard single rate with all the benefits.
Right.
That knowing that this family plan is as open, because they're currently trialing it in some regions, it is as open. It does provide that good a discount. So, I reckon that is more likely what we'll see. We'll see the raise of the Game Pass Ultimate, but then also here's this family plan. If you and 6 people get together, then you're paying, back to what the original price of Ultimate was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just think we're in such a weird place with where this is now, because I think that this story will develop, and if the FTC is reliable on anything, is that it is slow, and we probably won't see much movement on this for a while, or at least like the next major, like the thing the public will know about. I'm sure in the back right, like background, their lawyers are going to be working some shit out that we won't know about for weeks, months from now. Yeah, which is
at the
the nature of these things.
At the moment as well, like quite publicly, Sony has been at the ear of the FTC. We've seen all kinds of comments and documents, and especially stuff coming out of Brazil, with Sony making some questionable arguments. Now that it is, in the court of law, FTC against Microsoft, I wonder how much we'll still see a Sony presence there, like, or how active are they really going to push to swat this away?
Yeah,
because definitely Sony seems jostled.
Because if I remember right, isn't it's Sony that's really the only major player in the industry that's raising a red flag.
Like
on this.
Pretty much every large first party provider was just like, we don't care. What we don't have anything else to say. But Sony did make a couple of weird arguments in relation to the monopolization, or referencing Call of Duty as a genre unto its own, and a whole bunch of other weird stuff, or taking games away from players, or making it harder to access games for players while raising the prices of games, or paying for very, very clear exclusivity. I say that with no issue with exclusives whatsoever. It's business. But to say
they bring it up when they
you can't do
it
that
themselves.
Yeah, to say you can't do that while you've got 12 exclusives that you've paid for behind you.
Yeah, they do that, but like a lot of their first party stuff are kind of homegrown. Like they've been either they purchased the company after they've already been making exclusives for them forever already, or they're already an in-house company. So I guess that's a little bit different how Sony's doing. Sony doesn't have many acquisitions as Microsoft, obviously, and a lot of the acquisitions they have done, they've already been, like I said, they've been doing exclusive shit forever for PlayStation anyway.
Right.
And Microsoft's going out of their way to be like, that's a popular brand that everybody likes. I want that. And then they buy it.
Give me that.
Yeah. And so I could, that's definitely more monopolistic actions, where Sony's definitely been a lot more careful, curated, and playing the long game of how they build IPs.
Like to build up the relationship to the point where like, well, this can't fail. We've already been working together, and then a purchase occurs.
Yeah.
Right. But I still think we're not quite at the point of monopolization or even a worry about it. Because let's say hypothetically we get to the point where Microsoft does acquire, like it goes through, they own Activision-Blizzard, right? I don't really believe that they would make Call of Duty Xbox exclusive. I agree with Rut that would be a bad financial move on their part. But let's take that off the table, right? Like, let's look at where Microsoft is right now, where Starfield is going to be an exclusive, and Redfall is going to be an exclusive, and potentially Skyrim 2 is going to be an exclusive, right? So when you look at PlayStation's side of the fence, they don't have any exclusive that kind of really matches up in that way. I do feel like, as much as we like Sony's exclusives, they do kind of fall into that range of like narrative, sad dad, action adventure, right? Like a lot of them kind of fit that niche. There's a little differences, right? Like, you know, Ghost of Tsushima is Assassin's Creed but Japan, right? Or Detroit Become Human is Telltale but whatever the garbage David Cage makes.
But abusive.
Yeah, but you know, they have a few that go out there in terms of genre, but like the ones that hit really hard, Last of Us, God of War, you know, those kind of fit that niche. There's nothing that's going to be like Starfield or Skyrim on Sony's side. But like you were saying, they have a lot of homegrown talent that they've been working with for decades. Yeah. And I'd be pretty confident that at least one of those studios could be like, okay, well, we need to make something that's like a Skyrim.
Oh, they've already been... They're doing all those games as a service. They're like making like 6 of them or some shit right now. It's just growing, hoping one sticks is what they're doing.
Right.
We also know that Naughty Dog is moving on to something non-Uncharted, and they're giving the Uncharted franchise to a different company for like a reboot or something. I think the latter half of that is rumors at the moment.
And they're working on that Last of Us like multiplayer, like the
part
like
2
all in multiplayer.
Are they still working on that?
Allegedly,
supposedly.
Yeah, but you know, that's kind of my point, is that if this were a monopoly, it would mean that Sony couldn't do anything about this. But I do think that they have enough talent on their side where if they really wanted to, they could make their own take on like an open world, you know, fantasy game or a spacefaring whatever game. Or, you know, they own Bungie. They could just make Halo. Right, like they have the talent to do what they want to do.
Well, and the other thing we haven't really talked about is Nintendo still exists, and their games, their first party games, like shit on the sales of every other company. Like a 40 of like some 40 million copy selling thing isn't a big deal at Nintendo. Like, oh yeah, that's just run of the mill Nintendo sales, which would be Square Enix would just, you know, love that.
Yeah.
5 times Tomb Raider.
Finally, Tomb Raider could be profitable, right?
It's just nothing. Nintendo's just like, we don't give a shit. We're doing our own thing.
Yeah, and Nintendo's always been good at that, right? Like, remember when PlayStation tried to make Smash Bros? Womp womp.
Yeah, it's like kind of back when we had like when you had your Xbox, your PS2, and your GameCube sitting right next to each other in your cabinet. Kind of, I mean, even then, GameCube was kind of doing its own thing, but it felt like everyone was running the same race. With the Wii, Nintendo was like, I'm going to run my own race. And then I think what we're seeing here with Microsoft going off into streaming and you know, subscription games that you subscribe and can just play a shit ton of them. I think that's more Microsoft going off and being like, okay, like, yes, Sony, you sell the most consoles. We're going to go over here and do this instead.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, it's Sony's. They're just seeing a piece of their pie slip away. Where the future of PlayStation is probably something like Nintendo, where they're like, we just have to care about our shit. Yeah. Third party stuff, that's nice if we get some of that on the side, but I guess we're not getting that as much anymore.
Yeah. I mean, I think the day Xbox makes a God of War like a game where truly the narrative is like the best part of it, and it's like an action adventure, whatever.
I think Sony was meant to be that.
Yeah,
but
that could be.
It still it has like that feel of an indie, title that holds it back to an extent.
The original, I'm sure the sequel will be a big thing.
Yeah, the sequel's gonna be huge. Yeah, but I just think that right now they're both in such different lanes when it comes to software that even though, yes, they're both exclusives, like, you know, they both have their own exclusives, I don't feel like one owns all of the games in industry in a way that monopoly would imply.
Well, I mean, the advantage that PlayStation has that they're not monopolizing on.
Is it Spider-Man?
No, it's their backlog of content. I mean,
that they are not using.
They're not monetizing it. If they
so frustrating
took the opportunity to sit down and say like, okay, these are some of the most beloved PS1, PS2 games. Let's make them accessible underneath an umbrella like Game Pass. They'd make stupid money. I would go buy a PlayStation 5 just to play some of the older PS1 and PS2 games without having to emulate. In a heartbeat.
This is PlayStation Plus extra premium
they have
erasure.
a bunch of games. You can play a bunch of classic games right now.
Not that many. Not as many as they could have.
Have you guys, like, since PlayStation Plus Essentials released like 6 months ago, I think that there's maybe been like 5 PS1 games that have been added, if that.
Yeah.
That all they have to do is monopolize on that in some way, shape, or form. Take that backlog that everyone remembers playing as a kid, make it easily accessible in some way, shape, or form. You're making money.
Is this your backdoor Dark Cloud 3 moment? Is this your...
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. Like, I think that you had the PS2 games on PS4, but you don't have them on PS5 at the moment. So, like, what they've continued to do console after console is leave the previous consoles behind in some way, shape, or form. And, like, without realizing that a lot of people are nostalgic and will play the older games if you make them more readily available. I mean, look at people, the links that Nintendo has to go to stop people emulating older games because of the amount that people want to play. Like, make that stuff readily available and easy to get and monetize it, and you've got month after month subscription revenue. Like,
so I'm looking at the Eurogamer article, and it's at least been updated as early as September 20th. But they have added 1 PS1 game and 6 PSP games.
Are they like, would you say, oh, I'm excited, I would play that?
Echo Shift, Loco Roco, Toy Story 3 for PSP, and they added Siphon Filter 2.
Was that one of the ones by Ben Studio?
But yeah, it's just
it's baffling.
Case. It's truly baffling. They have so much in their backlog. But I mean, back when this was first announced, you can go back and listen to those podcast episodes. And I'll talk about my skepticism with the PS2 games for PS4, where they only put out 50 games. It's just, for a library that massive, they're leaving money on the table. It's wild.
That could be their differentiator. Like, Microsoft's got Game Pass with everything that it includes, and then PlayStation has some sort of classics subscription that allows you to get older games that are harder to play via emulation. I mean, the standard...
I can go out and buy a PlayStation 1 Classic and have access to more games than if I subscribe to their new service on my PS5.
Oh, damn.
Mind-blowing!
Yeah, but if they give you that service, they can't sell it to you in some other form later, is what some stupid executive's thinking.
Yeah. I mean, like, emulation, yes, it is very readily available, but a lot of people don't want to jump through the hurdles that sometimes you'll run into with emulation. Like, I don't want to figure out why this game's running too fast. Stuff like that. It's there's a barrier, and if they can just remove that barrier completely, make them affordable, like, don't be charging $30 for a PS1 game, but like $10 per or something, you're just going to get kind of a velocity going. And the fact that they just continue to be like so focused on something like Call of Duty when they've got this gold nugget that's just covered in a little bit of dirt right now that they could just brush off is baffling to me.
Well, it's like they say, guys, play has no limits. Am I right? All right, guys, play has no limits.
Except the console.
Yeah, I really feel like Sony shot themselves in the foot with that little tagline, because consistently it's been proven false. Like, even this right now, right? They're like, play has no limits, except that Microsoft, please give us that. Please give that back. Please don't take that from us. You know,
it's frustrating. At some point there will be a wake up call, I hope, but right now I don't have a lot of confidence in Sony as as like a value in gaming. Like, why would I buy a PlayStation 5 console that there's maybe a handful of games that interest me when I can either just use my PC or an Xbox console and access a lot more for without having to pay $70 a pop?
Well, I can give you a reason to buy a PlayStation 5.
Final
Forspoken.
Fantasy.
Well, that too, but also Forspoken.
Great segue.
Thank you. Forspoken, also coming out on PC, is a lot of fun. There's a demo out right now on PS5. I've been playing it. They do say they've harnessed the power of the PlayStation 5, though, if that means anything to you, Rut, if you'd like to buy one to...
I mean, the fact that it's coming out on PC at the same time. The last game that touted that they had harnessed the power of the PS5 was, Godfall?
Yes.
That then released on PS4.
Oh, man.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, because then they tamed the power, right?
Too much gold.
Too much. So Forspoken is that new game from Square Enix, from Luminous Production, the people who made Final Fantasy 15, right? And you really feel that in the DNA of this game. And I should also say that this morning, when the podcast goes live, we will have we'll have another hands-on preview of Forspoken and an interview with the devs. So do check that out. There's some pretty interesting tidbits that we got from the interview. That's really great. So please go ahead and read that. It's pretty fascinating.
We should specify that our preview is from from a preview that is not the publicly available demo. So
yes,
correct.
Yeah,
there's going to be
much
more there.
I think she played like 4 hours or something.
Yeah.
She played a good chunk. Yeah.
Like she told me that our previewer, Courtney, she said that the preview at New York was chapters 2, 3, and 5, whereas the demo, I think, is chapter 4. So that's kind of what you're looking at in terms of the differences. So if you go out to your PlayStation right now and download it, you will be playing chapter 4 or so. It doesn't say that in the game, though, so take that for what you will. If you're watching on video, Rut's dog is having a good time in the background right now, just hanging out. Well,
perfect. Absolute perfection.
So Forspoken feels like you guys remember in Final Fantasy 15, the gameplay was just hold one button to attack and hold one button to dodge everything, and Noctis will like auto dodge with his like magic teleporting ability thing. So Forspoken feels like they took that auto dodge and made a full video game out of it. Because you do everything kind of a little more manually. So like when you hold circle, you do your magic parkour, which we've all seen in the trailers. It's where Frey kind of runs really fast, climbs up stuff automatically, vaults over low obstacles and all that, right? So that's sort of your auto dodge, but now you don't automatically dodge. You have to manually get out of the way, or if you press it right before a hit, you will do an auto dodge, but you can't just like hold it down, right? And then all of your spells are locked onto your triggers. So your right trigger, your R2 is going to do more basic offensive spells, and your L2 is going to be doing more support spells. So if you think of it like a shooter, it's like your right trigger is your gun, your left trigger is your grenade, is kind of how that kind of shakes out. And then the L1, R1 brings up radial menus that you swap between all of your spells. So it's a little bit of a complex system at first, especially with the demo, because they throw you in after you've learned like a ton of spells. So you're in on the 5th floor instead of the ground floor. Right. So you're kind of learning a bunch of stuff all at once, or trying to get used to it all at once. But the combat is very frenetic and chaotic, and that's kind of my jam. I wouldn't quite liken it to like a Devil May Cry, but there is something very viscerally fun about like magic parkouring around, dodging at the right time, and like slinging spells, which they do kind of auto target them, which is useful because of just how much you're going to be moving around. Like you can aim them manually if you want, but I mean, some of them you do have to, but for the most part, I think the auto targeting works really well for what they're trying to go for here, because they're not trying to go for like pro elite gamer, like headshot sort of things. They're definitely going for more, fire all over the battlefield because of you, and you're like in 20 places at once kind of a feeling.
That's so very much more cinematic combat versus skilled combat.
I think there is more skill to it. I wouldn't quite call it
Okay.
cinematic. It is very flashy, but you can die pretty quick if you don't dodge at the right time, or like, so if you do take a direct hit, your cuff, which is called cuff, is a magical little guy, will do a block for you. It feels like the shield sign in Witcher. What's it like?
Quinn.
Quen. Yeah, where you have like, it feels like there's a bubble around you, and every time you take a hit, you don't take, well, you take a little bit of damage in Forspoken, but the shield protects you. And if you press triangle at the right time, you do a big counter that like clears the space around you to give you some, like, basically create a little pocket for you, right? Yeah.
Cool.
Mm-hmm. But it's fun, I think. The running around feels pretty good, feels pretty solid. I do have a few worries about the world itself, because it did feel like, you remember how Final Fantasy 15 felt open, like too open, like really open.
Oh, you mean how the open world was fucking dog shit? Is that what you're getting at?
It was just a little bit, I mean, it's pretty, right? Like the Final Fantasy 15 open world's very pretty, but it's very empty.
Yes.
Way too much driving.
Sucked.
Yes, and Forspoken, I worry, just like this area in the demo, I felt a similar vibe of like, yeah, you get to run really fast, which is fun, but I'm still running for like 2 minutes. And like these green fields are pretty, but they're all green fields.
And are they going to be pretty when you're 15 hours into the game?
Yeah, so
That's the big question.
That's a worry I do have, is that the worlds are maybe too big for what they're going for. But they give you a map, and you can highlight markers that are like, oh, go here to collect this thing, go there to collect that thing. So you'll at least know where you're going. It's just going to take a bit to get between the spots.
I don't have much faith in making a compelling open world.
I can see that. And perhaps my favorite funny little thing is in the accessibility menu, which I do recommend going through, especially if you're playing either the full game or the demo, because they have things like auto pickup, like resources, which is nice. Because when you're running around, the last thing you want to do is mash triangle. So just run around. You auto pick up things. But there's a setting for, I forget what they call it exactly, but it's like the radiant dialogue between Frey and the Cuff, where you can actually turn it down and turn it off. I mean, you can also make it go like always talking too, so you can make it whatever preference you want. But if you turn it to minimal, they say only story related things will be said between them.
What kind of stuff do they say?
They're very cheeky. They're very sarcastic. Like they're kind of, have you ever had like a good friend, but all you do is rib each other? Like you never say a nice thing to each other, but you're also like the best of friends.
I don't know anything about what you're talking about.
Really?
That's because Otten has no fucking friends. What a loser.
It is a lot like that, where like after you finish a battle, Frey's like, huh, I did pretty good, and then the Cuff's like, passable. It's that sort of thing.
So you're Sam. Got it.
Yes, it's a fun little tete-a-tete, but I only played the demo for like, I don't know, 90 minutes or so to like complete it, and I got to the end where it said thanks for playing, and I was already hearing a lot of lines repeat, which I mean, it's expected, but also if you're gonna build this game with the intent of there's a lot of radiant dialogue between these two while you roam around an open world to do a lot of activities, sometimes over and over, you need to record a lot of voice lines to keep it interesting.
Mimir is gonna have us spoiled for a while.
Yeah. Or even like Guardians of the Galaxy. I think of that, where there's like a shit ton of radiant dialogue in that game.
That's true.
It's the
They
same.
weren't contending really with the open world though. It was all level.
It was all linear. Yeah,
but it felt natural and it felt good throughout. There was never any like, God, shut up.
But yeah, this one is definitely like, it gets repetitive. Like you pick up a thing, I'll just pocket that for later, or you open up a chest, I guess. It's pretty constant. And this was just on the normal setting. I didn't tweak that Frey and Cuff dialogue thing to be minimal or extra. It was just the as intended experience. So mileage may vary. on your enjoyment of that, because there's a little bit of a Marvel-y flair to it, where it's like quippy, witty, like snarky, sarcastic.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But overall, I think I'm still excited for Forspoken. That comes out January 24. Again, we have that preview on our site you can check out. But I think that wraps up this week's episode of the TechRaptor podcast. We hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please feel free to leave a review, share it with a friend, hit subscribe on YouTube or on your podcatcher app or whatever else you happen to be listening on, and hit us up on our socials where we're going to be interactive. You know, we'll maybe put out some polls, do some tweets, and you know, if you say something funny or interesting, we might read it out here on the pod. And you can also go to techraptor.net for more news, reviews, features, previews of Forspoken, and etc. But if you want more of this show, we will be back next Monday, and we will see you then.